When is the right time to exploit teams waiting on quarterbacks? What's the latest on the Steelers' backfield? And should you be targeting DK Metcalf in your Football Guys leagues? Plus, former Football Guys and FFPC main event league champion Dave Chiodo sits in the co-host chair with me to talk David Johnson, DeAndre Hopkins, prepping for his pros versus Joe's draft, and much more. We've got a great show for you. Dave Chiodo is here. I'm Eric Balkman. Stick around. Your High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour starts now.
Hold your hands, everybody, if you got what it takes. Cause I'm KRS and I'm on the mic and premieres on the
Broadcast live and heard around the world, you are now listening to the most entertaining hour of radio on the planet. It's the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour presented by MyFFPC.com with your hosts Eric Balkman and Dave Gerzak. The High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour is your home for football analysis from the best fantasy players in the world. And now, because no one else was available, here are Eric Balkman and Dave Gerzak.
Thank you, Rob. Greetings and salutations to each and every one of you Balkaholics and Gerzak addicts. Welcome to the latest episode of the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour presented by MyFFPC.com. I am, of course, your slightly above average host, Eric Balkman. My co-host is normally the patron saint of fantasy football, Dave the Dizzle Gerzak. However, tonight, sitting in for him is a high-stakes player who's coming off not only two Football Guys league titles, but a main event league title in 2018 as well. He'll be drafting in the 2019 FFPC Pros vs. Joe's League Number 5 I Must Break You League on Monday, July 29th. You follow him on Twitter at Dave_Chiodo. Please welcome in my co-host for this week, Mr. Dave Chiodo. Dave, welcome to the show, man.
Thank you very much. Glad to be here, Eric.
I know you've been listening for a while, so you know the extremely low bar that Gerzak has set for you that you will be leaping over this week.
Hey, well, listen, I'd be remiss if I didn't say, congrats on 400 plus episodes. That's a great accomplishment, and it's just a testament to what you guys do with this podcast and the high stakes fantasy in general. It's really kudos. It's great to have you guys, and it's come a long way since the beginning days when I started, which was way back in 2003. So congrats, and we appreciate being here.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you. So, I mean, it's people like you that keep the podcast going, people like you that keep the FFPC going. So we definitely appreciate that. Coming up on tonight's show, Dave and I are going to tell you the latest on the Tyreek Hill situation, what we're expecting from young receivers like Antonio Callaway and DK Metcalf in 2019, and much more. Now, if you are in the chat room right now, I thank you for your dedication. This was pre-recorded, so Dave and I are not talking live. I'm probably on a plane coming back home right now, and Dave's probably enjoying his Friday evening somewhere. But you can communicate with the other people in the chat room if you want it. If you want to connect with us on Twitter for next week's show, it's at HSFF Hour, at Eric Balkman. Dave is on Twitter, at Dave_Chiodo. You can post on our Facebook page, facebook.com/HSFF Hour, 347-426-3682. That's 347-GAME-OVA. You can also email the show at the inbox, highstakesfantasyfootball@gmail.com. All your tweets, all your emails, all your questions coming up in the fantasy feedback segment later on in the show. Our producer and mutual friend Rob and our audio engineer Bryce get the week off this week as I'm rolling solo with Dave on this. I want to inform everybody, in case you're wondering, the Maiden Dynasty drafts are still going off at myffpc.com. Best Ball, Superflex, and Double Ups always available there as well. Those drafts are going off every day. If you want your draft slot early for the FFPC main event, make sure your teams are paid in full by July 22nd. That's roughly 2.5 weeks from today. And if you are paid in full by the 22nd, you will get your early draft spot the weekend of July 29th. So that is exciting as well. That's the next deadline that we really want to stress to all you main event players to make sure that you can get maximum preparation done for your main event teams this year. Dave, before we get into fantasy football, tell the listeners what you're doing for a living when you're not winning all these football guys in main event leagues.
Well, I mean, I've been in the office supply industry for the last 30 years. I'm a sales rep for a company here and been at the same company for about 15 years. That's what my business is. As far as personally, I was a high school and youth basketball coach in the Pittsburgh area for probably about 10 to 11 years. Have recently retired from that and focusing solely on fantasy football. The winters are long here in Pittsburgh, so anything you can do to occupy your time helps the winters go a little bit faster. But this is part of my therapy for the winter is the fantasy football.
Exciting stuff. I like that too. So what level of basketball were you coaching?
Well, youth all the way up into high school.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. We had we were successful in many areas, won a few championships, but it's just one of those things nowadays where several kids get misplaced, and you just want to guide them in the right direction and teach them basketball and the right way to go about their business, and hopefully you steer them in the right path for their next journey, which is more importantly, which is college and then on to the real world. So that's the focus that we tried to have for years, and we're pretty successful at it. And all the kids and the parents that I coached had a great amount of respect for, and vice versa. So it's a great time. I really enjoy being around and teaching kids the game of basketball, and it's something I had a passion for. So I kind of miss it. Maybe go back to it at one point in time, but as I mentioned, it is nice having some free spare time to do what I want to do with my time.
Yeah, and I was just going to say too, you have that sort of competitive thirst is quenched with fantasy football now, because, well, the difference is too, I mean, your primary goal when you're coaching basketball was to develop young kids into becoming successful young adults, and the coaching aspect of the actual game and teaching the game is probably secondary to that. But you don't have to worry about that with fantasy football, man. It's all about domination and getting your team out there and beating the other guys, right?
That's exactly right. And then competitive I am. You love competition, and that competition brings out what I think is the best. But it can be it can drive you crazy a little bit too. But in the long run, it's fantastic, and enjoy the competition and the relationships, and like I said, building fantasy rosters is just something that until you experience it, you really don't appreciate it. But it's a tremendous amount of fun.
Let's talk about the tremendous amount of fun you had in 2018, because it was a successful year for you. You get a pair of Football Guys Football Guys league titles, a main event league title, and then you take 75th overall in the main event, and you get 166th overall in the Football Guys contest, as well as 17th overall. I'm curious, a lot went right for you. Did you end up with a lot of the same studs on a bunch of your teams? Did you happen to build kind of different teams that ended up being very successful on their own? What was the key to success for you in 2018, man?
Well, as a coach, you always remember your losses more than you remember your wins. So in lieu of that, the team that I had with my son who drafted it and was managing it for the most part was 11-0 and lost in the first round of the playoffs with our third Football Guys draft. And that's the kind of one that sticks in your craw. You win the league by 100 points, and you go in 11-0, and then you lose in the first round, and kind of ends it for you. But all the teams that we had, all three of those, and the main event team that I had, all pretty much very different. I had targeted a few guys that I liked. I drafted early enough to where there was guys that I was getting earlier that eventually, as the months wore on, or the weeks wore on, they were going higher in the drafts. But I did love Christian McCaffrey, and I did take him. I had Hopkins on one of my teams, but getting the guys like Connor and Kittle later in the draft, obviously those make a big impact when you're drafting guys in the later rounds that are top players at their position. So a lot of things, as you said, went right. We drafted well, and the strategy I used was to draft seemed to work last year. It's only taken 16 years to, perfect, so to speak, but we'll see if it can continue this year.
I want to unpack a couple of things that you said there. Starting with Christian McCaffrey, you said you loved him last year. I know a lot of people were on him last year, and he was drafted high. Now we see in FFPC it's been him and Saquon Barkley as like the 101 and 102 and however you want to slice it by and large as far as ADP goes. Do you still like McCaffrey at that price point? And is there another running back as you look at, sort of the slate this year of where these guys are going? Is there another running back that you like that you'll be drafting with equal gusto as you did with McCaffrey in 2018?
Well, I mean, my draft strategy when I go in is, again, coming into the high stakes fantasy league, for the most part, I could tell you the top 24 players. By the time September rolls around, I could recite the top 24. Now, what order they go in is always off a little bit, but those same 24 players seem to go year in and year out. So what I like to do is target a guy that I think is going a little bit later that I would want, because the one thing you learn about this league is if you like somebody, you got to go and get them, because 9 times out of 10 they're not going to come back around at your next pick. So with McCaffrey, he was one of the guys that I had targeted, and early on in the draft he was waiting and not going until mid-second. But obviously after the first preseason game, I think he ran for 100 yards and 2 touchdowns. That draft stock moved him up into the sometimes early first round. This year, the top 4 is the top 4. If you get a top 4 selection, I think they're pretty pat. Anything after that, I do have question marks about the remaining backs, whether it be David Johnson or the next group of guys that you want to throw in there. As far as I'm concerned, those top 4 are elite, and I don't think I can see anybody like a David Johnson moving into that territory as far as my liking is right now.
Real quick with George Kittle, because, well, I mean, obviously we saw with James Conner last year. I mean, there's a lot of people that took flyers on him early when they were drafting early and cashed in when Le'Veon Bell decided that he wasn't going to play in 2018. So that goes without saying. But I'm curious with Kittle, what was it about him that really attracted you to making him a pick for your team? And could we see, I mean, obviously, Kittle's going as a top 3 tight end this year,
right,
so you're not going to get the same value on him. But is there maybe another tight end, similar to the McCaffrey question, is there another tight end that's going in that range, a tight end that is maybe not the top, one of the first 3 off the board, but maybe one of the first 10 off the board that could really outperform their draft spot this year?
Well, I mean, the tight end, because this is a tight end driven league, is always something that they always get pushed up a little more than usual. Last year when I drafted, I think I got Kittle in the 7th or 8th round. I don't see anyone that in that right now that I think is worthy of that. I mean, guys that I'm keeping an eye on, is Delaney Walker, just to see how he comes back from injury. I'm curious to see. He was always a favorite target of Mariota when he was healthy. So I'm keen on him. I'm a little suspect on, the other guys there, the Jared Cooks, when they change teams or their situations change. He was a tight end 6 last year, but that situation's kind of changed a little bit with him moving on. So I don't have a tight end as of right now that I'm targeting in that area. However, I seem to be favoring the O.J. Howards and the Ingrams in trying to get one of those. If I don't get an elite in the first 2 rounds, trying to target one of them, maybe early in the 4th or the 5th round, just to shore up that position if I could.
Dave Chiodo, a champion in the FFPC main event leagues last year, as well as a couple of Football Guys league titles under his belt, joining me this week on the HSFF Hour. We don't talk about quarterbacks on this show a whole lot, Dave, and I think it's because FFPC players push them down so far in drafts where you only have to start one that they're not as important as getting your backs, receivers, and tight ends right. But is there something to exploit there? Is there something, because, I mean, you'll be drafting in Pros versus Joes coming up at the end of the month. I expect that quarterbacks are going to fall in that draft as well. Is that a position that you can exploit and grab maybe an elite guy later than they should go? Or are you still of the mind like, look, I need to stack these other positions and I'll worry about my quarterbacks later?
Well, I mean, that's the difference between redraft and best ball. In the redraft, I don't see the value of taking a quarterback early. I know last year, obviously, when you have an elite quarterback that goes off and he outscores all the other quarterbacks by 100 points, that's a big thing in a week-to-week head-to-head matchup. But with all their quarterbacks that you can even get even off the waiver wire during a redraft, I don't see the value of taking one that early. But I'm a guy that kind of zigs when everybody zags, or vice versa. If I see a quality guy on the board, if Deshaun Watson's there and it's still the 7th round, and I think I can get great value with him versus waiting until maybe the 13th or 14th for, a Big Ben or a Rivers or somebody like that, then I will jump the gun. Best ball, to me, is a completely different element, because I would be more prone to take a couple quarterbacks earlier to try and shore up that spot, as opposed to waiting and hoping, because obviously once you draft, the draft is the key part of the best ball draft, whereas the redraft, you can have a guy who gets injured in the first week and you got to, maneuver around to try and find the waiver wire guy that'll work for you, or hopefully your backup hits. So at best ball, I probably would target quarterbacks a little earlier than normal than I would in a redraft, and that would be my rationale.
You alluded to this earlier when we talk about the big 4 running backs. And this is basically, I don't think much has changed on this since we launched drafts in mid-January. It's been Barkley, Elliott, Kamara, and McCaffrey. I mean, pick whatever order that you want. But David Johnson, I would say within the last 2 or 3 weeks, has risen up to being that 5th running back, and in some cases being the 5th overall pick. It does not sound like you're ready to put him in that tier. I'm curious as to why you're still keeping him out of the top elite tier at running backs this year.
Well, I mean, again, the redraft versus the best ball is again one of the major differences. In a redraft, to me, it's an 11-week sprint. So every week to week matters. A couple points here, a couple points there matter when you're dealing in head to head, and your record is one of the indicators that could get you into the playoffs. So I like consistency. I like guys that I think week in and week out are going to have those consistent numbers. Not knowing the uncertainty of the new offense, the new quarterback, the new coaching staff, the entire situation there. Obviously, I kind of sift through the white noise and try and get more consistent players that are in established situations. So, again, love him as a player. Probably think he's going to be a pretty decent back this year. I put him and a couple others. Le'Veon Bell's in that situation too. Great talent, but new situation. You don't know how they're going to use them. Adam Gase didn't have a tendency to, let Drake run and just let him go and be the guy. He brought in Frank Gore, who took a lot of carries away from him. So I just get a little leery. I heard a little bit about Chase Edmonds, how they're going to work him into the situation. And when you're talking, when you're cutting hairs between these elite guys, the littlest piece of news can alter that one way or another. And that's just right now where David Johnson is, in my belief.
In prepping for this Pros versus Joe's draft that you'll have in basically 3.5 weeks here, you did a live classic with the FFPC. I'm curious as to your thoughts, and not that this is like a shocking pick that you made, because plenty of people are taking, in fact, the majority of people are taking DeAndre Hopkins as the first receiver off the board over players like Julio Jones, Devontae Adams. I have seen, in fact, I was just commissioning an online draft the other night, and Adams went 5th overall after the big 4 running backs. I'm curious why just get your thoughts on why Hopkins is a better pick for you this season than Devontae Adams.
Well, again, when you're talking about these elite guys, you really are splitting hairs. So it's just a matter of preference. Hopkins, again, same system he's in. I think this could be a breakout year for Watson if O'Brien lets him, do what he can do and just let him fling the ball around. I think that Hopkins is obviously going to be a top-notch guy. When I was there, I was actually hesitant between him and Bell, thinking, do I got to go back? Should I make sure I get my back? But one of the guys I moved up my chart that I like sort of in the McCaffrey way of last year is Dalvin Cook. I think he's in a perfect situation. He's with a coaching staff that is probably going to want to run the ball more than they're going to want to pass the ball this year, because it just didn't work for him last year when Cousins was throwing the ball 40 and 50 times. So I think him in that offense with the offensive coordinator they have, if you look at the splits at the last 3 games of the year after they fired their offensive coordinator, they're going to be a more run-heavy team. Plus, he can catch the ball out of the backfield. So I was pretty confident my thought was if I went Bell, I could probably get a good receiver on the way back because I love Juju. But it ended up being that I could have drafted Hopkins and take Odell Beckham with my second pick, but I did pass on him and went with Dalvin Cook because he's the guy that I had targeted. And I do like to get at least one guy that I think is going to be a stud running back. So that was the rationale.
Makes sense to me, and I think that's a strategy I've employed numerous times over the years in fantasy to some aplomb too. So I'm on board with that. Let's talk about the receivers here, and I'm going off of memory here, but you take 3 receivers in the first 4 rounds, I believe, as you get Hilton and Galladay with Hopkins. So those are your top 3 receivers. Then you stayed away from the position until round 11. You get Geronimo Allison. Why did you end up going that route where you really pounded running backs after those top 3 receivers?
Well, I kind of use my strategy is I kind of use the second running back position as a second flex position. You're going to be weak at one position no matter how you draft, even if you get every pick that you want to pick. So my philosophy is I get the one elite back, or so I feel is an elite back. I follow it up with the guys that are, high targeted guys, plus 120 target guys. And then I just take a bunch of crapshoots with backs for that second position. And I'm hoping that if 2 hit, you're in the driver's seat. If one of them hits, you got your 2 starting running backs. If 2 of them hit, you can always fill one in for the flex spot. Or if you have injuries with receivers, then you can fill them in there. It's just kind of what I've been doing recently. It's been working. So I did draft like a Royce Freeman, Anito Smith, and Austin Eckler, and Giovanni Bernard, hoping that eventually one of those guys are going to pop and be someone that you can use on an every week basis. And like I said, if a couple of them pop, then you got stud receivers that are going to get targeted, and you're following up with some backs that are getting some touches.
Dave Chiodo, a dual winner last year, both league FFPC main event league title as well as 2 Football Guys league titles to his name, joining me on the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour this week. Let's talk about rookie running backs here. The top 2, by and large, off the board via ADP from FantasyMojo.com for FFPC leagues have been David Montgomery and Darrell Henderson. Which guy are you more likely to draft this season if they are still going at the end of the 5th round? Is it David Montgomery or is it Darrell Henderson?
Well, I would probably tell you that neither would be on my team based on that current ADP. But if I had a pick, I would probably take Montgomery in Chicago. Mike Davis being there scares me a little bit. Obviously, they're saying he's going to be a 3-down back. With Tariq Cohen there, that production I can't count on. I think I looked that there's about 290 some touches that weren't to Tariq Cohen last year. So there are many touches there, I guess, between Jordan and the other Jordan Howard and the other backs that were there for him to consume. It's just don't know. As far as Henderson, I mean, you're looking at a situation to me is Gurley is still being drafted in the 2nd round. So unless you're taking him as a handcuff, that's a tough guy to take as a flyer, hoping that Gurley doesn't pan out. If Gurley pans out, he's going to be the workhorse guy and the guy that they're using pretty much on 3 downs. And that's just to say you don't know if a John Kelly or a Malcolm Brown are going to step up and take touches away from him, being that he's a rookie. And, you'll start hearing he's not picking up the blitzes and things like that. So I kind of stay away from him at that ADP. But like I said, if I had to pick, I would probably pick Montgomery.
Yeah, but by and large, if those guys are both on the board at the end of the 5th round, you're still probably looking elsewhere because of the potential. I mean, honestly, the low floor for both of those guys, right?
Correct, and that's what I'm trying. I'm trying to get guys that have some upside, and sometimes the best laid plans never work out. Had Austin Eckler last year, and now you're hearing this year that they may ease Gordon's role at the beginning of the year and ramp him up towards later in the year. So I had Eckler, who was very efficient with his touches last year, but then he finally got the opportunity to shine in the big game on a Sunday night against the Steelers, and Justin Jackson comes in and kind of steals his thunder. So, you get into those situations, and that's when I talk about those rookies. I get a little concerned about the fact that, their upside is, if you're going to get 180 touches from them, there's a lot of guys in that field that you can get that are pass catchers, a Dion Lewis and guys like that are going to produce weekly, that I would probably take shots over those guys that have, to me, limited upside.
As a player who maybe is, I think it's safe to say that you're definitely more comfortable. You've definitely been very successful with the 20-round, redraft classic formats. What do you think as you look forward to your Pros versus Joes League coming up here at the end of July? What do you think the biggest challenge is going to be for you as you do embark on this 28-round affair where you won't have any opportunity to make any changes to your roster throughout the entire season?
Well, roster construction, I'm trying to read every article I can to determine, what is the best roster construction. I don't know off the top of my head. It's kind of a crapshoot. The couple years I've done them, I've had major injuries to my quarterbacks early on. So that's why I was mentioning earlier about drafting the quarterbacks and locking that position up just from past experiences that worked out poorly for me. But as it goes, I gotta get the fine line between how many receivers I think I need to carry, how many running backs I need to carry, vice versa. To me, I don't know the defenses and the kickers so much, if I should be wasting so many roster spots on those. 28 is a lot of players, gives you a lot of room to take some upside guys. And in that scenario, obviously, you can take some reaches, and I would probably be more inclined to stack players on teams I normally wouldn't draft players on. Team like Buffalo, maybe you take two of their receivers and hope one of them pans out to be a number 2. But that's my biggest concern is just, players. I can figure out the players that I want. It's just a matter of trying to figure out how many of each I need to have at all the positions.
Dave, a couple of emails, if I can get to them here for you, that came in over the last couple of days from listeners. Carl in Lexington, Oregon writes, I keep seeing Antonio Callaway hyped up as a breakout late-round flyer, but how good can he be as the number 3 behind Beckham and Landry? Thanks, Dave. That is Carl in Lexington, Oregon. I've seen sort of the same thing. There's no questioning Antonio Callaway's talent. I think the key for him has been just adjusting to the NFL and staying away from the off-field incidents that sort of plagued him in college. But behind Beckham and Landry, I don't know if you got to count on an injury to either one of these guys, because I don't know how much value I see with Callaway if he keeps getting blocked, not only by Beckham and Landry, but you have other pass catchers like, Duke Johnson and David Njoku out there as well.
Right. Well, he's a perfect example of a guy I would probably not draft in a redraft, but would probably take a shot on him in the best ball, because he, to me, is like a Deshaun Jackson type. He's going to go 1 week where he's going to catch 2 bombs for, 80 yards and 70 yards, and he's going to put up 30-some points for you. And then there's going to go weeks where he's going to get you, 3 or 4 points. So he's one of those guys I would put in that category of a best ball guy that I would take a flyer on late. And then obviously if an injury does occur, but in that offense, they are loaded with a lot of talented players around them now, between Landry and Beckham and Callaway and Njoku, and the list goes on and on. I don't know there's enough balls on that field to be able to support all those guys, which is one of the concerns I have with the Browns. But Callaway is that unique player that has the speed and can catch the deep ball. So redraft, no, but I would consider him definitely in the Pros versus Joes.
Let's go to Fort Myers, Florida. It is Ray writing in. Which non-Hopkins Texans receiver do you like better, Dave? Will Fuller or Kiki QT? And to give you some idea, these guys are actually going fairly close in FFPC best ball drafts right now. Will Fuller is going on average at the 808, and actually the next receiver going off the board right after him is Kiki QT at the 902. So very, very close there. Do you have a preference between these two, or if you drafted a bunch of best balls, would you try to split your shares between them evenly?
QT is interesting just from the standpoint of, he catches the short intermediate routes and can catch 5-6 balls a game, which is very, that's very conducive to what you're looking for in this game. But again, best ball, I would probably go Fuller. He does have those games again where, you don't notice them. But if he can stay healthy with Deshaun Watson, they seem to have a connection that every time they're on the field, they seem to connect on a long touchdown pass, and it seems to work for them. Neither of them impact my Hopkins like for Hopkins, because I think he's in an elite class on his own. But I would probably lean Fuller there, just from the standpoint, if he stays healthy for a full year, and I think this may be Deshaun Watson's breakout year, that he's a guy I would probably be targeting in that range.
Dave, let's get into the question that we always like to ask our guests every week. A player that you see as an early round bust, a player that won't be making his way onto any of your teams this year. And then on the other side of the coin, a player that's going in the mid rounds, maybe late rounds, that you think is very attractive for fantasy this year, a guy that you'll be targeting on a bunch of your teams.
Well, I mean, after you get past the Gordons and the Le'Veon Bells, I mean, that next tier of running backs has Joe Mixon, Cook, Melvin Gordon, and Bell. I'm sort of leaning against Joe Mixon. I know he had a productive year last year. New offensive coordinator. They're going to talk about getting Giovanni Bernard more involved in the offense. I just don't see him on my team as a first round pick or early second round pick. Again, I have Cook rated a little higher than him right now. So my guy I would probably be avoiding would be Mixon of that crew. As far as, the mid-tier guys, I have, because the way I draft, I have so many different running backs that I look at that, potentially have some very high upside, that they're not going until the 10th, 11th round. Bernard, I did mention, is one of them. I think he's going to have a bigger role. But Carlos Hyde, who's, I don't know his current ADP, but he's been drafted probably in the 10th round or later. I think he's going to get some play in Andy Reid's offense. Damian Williams has a tendency to get nicked up. And I think if he's involved in that offense, he could be an elite talent under Andy Reid in the Kansas City offense, which is obviously explosive. So I'm kind of targeting him. You hate to say you're hoping for injuries or you're waiting on injuries, but he's a guy that I think would way far surpass his ADP if he gets an opportunity, because I think he is a talented number one pick out of Ohio State. That he could actually excel in that offense. So I have been leaning towards him. The guy that I love that, he's not being drafted as a first rounder is Juju Schuster. I just think his upside is so dramatic. He had 25% of the target share last year with Antonio Brown. With Antonio Brown gone, I can only see that going up. He had 160 plus targets. So you're losing another guy that had 169 targets, and those targets going to have to go to others. And I could see him just with an exceptional target ratio this year. So he's one that I'm targeting as another receiver that I think by the time the draft moves up might be in the top notch. I think he's going in the second round, early second round, but I could see him moving up the chart by the time September comes.
Yeah, to your point, Juju Smith-Schuster, 204 is where his ADP sits right now. He has gone as high as the 110 over the last week. And Carlos Hyde, another guy you mentioned, he is going at the 1106 in FFPC best ball drafts right now. Makes a lot of sense to grab him at that spot there, given the potential upside for that Chiefs offense, as Dave alluded to. Dave, let's get into some of the news and notes around the NFL. I know it's not a super busy time, but there is still stuff out there that I think we need to address, and I want to thank Football Guys, Roto World, and of course Rob for the rundown this week. Let's start with Emmanuel Sanders over in Denver. He still says that coming back week one for him is, quote, realistic. This is according to Nikki Jababala. I hope I'm pronouncing that name right, on Twitter. Emmanuel Sanders says he's not going to, list a deadline or some sort of concrete timetable. But he says that where he's at right now, it's where he expected to be after he tore his Achilles last year. He's been in the league 9 years. He thinks he can still put together a Pro Bowl season. So let's unpack this a little bit and expand it out to the Denver receivers. Emmanuel Sanders, and I'm going to list their ADPs for you here. Emmanuel Sanders currently going at the 1109. The other guys that would stand to benefit from him not being out there would be Cortland Sutton, who's going at the 909, and then, of course, course, Deshaun Hamilton, a guy that was a rookie last year, is going at the 15-10 in best ball. So your thoughts on how good Sanders can be this year, as well as if he does not come back healthy, could this mean big starts from either Sutton or Hamilton?
Yeah, I don't know if that offense with Flacco and the quarterback can sustain top two wide receivers. I think Sutton has an opportunity to break out. And being that he's a 9th round pick, I would still probably lean towards Hamilton. I think he may have a little bit better value if he's playing in the slot in that offense. I think Flacco has a tendency to lock in on some players. So I'm going to be very interested to see in the preseason early on who he has a connection with. You were able to find that a couple years ago with Jimmy Garoppolo and Marquise Goodwin when they first started in preseason. And I'm kind of waiting to see, but based on their ADPs, I would probably lean towards Hamilton at his draft position until I got a better feel for Sutton. I think Sutton has a bigger upside. He's a better talent. But in that situation, I would lean Hamilton. Emmanuel Sanders is obviously, if he can come back to, 90% of what he was a year ago before he got injured, he has some value. But I don't know if I would take him. I would probably be more inclined in the late teens as I would take him at his current ADP. Coming back from an injury, new quarterback, that kind of stuff scares me when you're looking at your redraft leagues.
Yeah, and I totally agree with that. I mean, the thing of it is like this is kind of a devastating injury, especially for a wide receiver. And Emmanuel Sanders, it's not like he's 22 or 20. I think about when the Deontay Foreman from Houston. I mean, he tore it, and like that stunk. But he's still a young man who can come back from something like that. Sanders, he's 30-something years old. It's just there's a lot of red flags on that, so I probably will be staying away. In fact, I owned one share of him in Dynasty, and I actually traded him away about a month or so ago and have not looked back on that at all. Let's stay in the same conference, different division, different position. James Conner, he says that he actually expects his role for the Steelers this year to be very similar to what it was last year, according to NFL.com. He says he's going to be a big part of the Steelers' offensive game plan week in and week out. If you remember last year, 1,470 yards from scrimmage for Conner, 13 touchdowns, 12 rushing, 1 catching the ball while he filled in for Le'Veon Bell. We actually heard, rumors, I guess, and actually from Conner's lips himself said that he thought that there was going to be a split workload between him, Jalen Samuels, and Benny Snell. One of the beat reporters, I'm forgetting his name, Mark, I can't think of it. He writes for The Athletic, but he kind of threw cold water on that, and he said, like, look, there's once the bullets start flying, that the Steelers are going to be riding James Conner much more than they will Samuels or Snell. So I think you look at this from a fantasy value standpoint. James Conner, Dave, is going at the 204 in drafts right now. I think this report makes you feel pretty good about him drafting him there. Let's say if you go receiver at the end of the first, or maybe you want to double up on running backs. I think that's a decent way to spend an early second-round pick in the FFPC.
Well, I agree. I think a lot of that was lip service, and the beat writer that reported it kind of alluded to that when he made the comment about there was going to be split carries. I mean, listen, you look at Mike Tomlin's offense over the course of his entire career, and he's never really had two backs that have flourished. He's always been a one-back guy. Even when Le'Veon Bell got hurt the first year, and he was suspended for the 3 or 4 games the one year, and D'Angelo Williams came in and just ran rampant. And then as soon as Le'Veon Bell came back, D'Angelo went to the bench, and there was you nowhere to see him. So I'm of the belief that Conner is going to be the workhorse as he was last year. My concern is can he withstand the punishment of the grind? If they are concerned about that, I could see Samuels and possibly Snell taking a little bit of the touches away from him. But I agree, he's going to be the workhorse with the Steelers. Big Ben loves him, and I can't imagine they're going to go away from him based on the year that he had. I think he averaged 4.5 or 4.6 yards per carry last year. So if he gets 250 touches running the ball, and he gets another 70 targets, I mean, he's still going to be a 300 touch guy. And all you can ask for is the opportunity, and I think he's going to get it, and I don't think there's going to be any concern about that. Once the year starts.
Dave, are you a Steelers fan? Do you follow the team pretty closely?
I think it's the law when you live in Pittsburgh. I think if not, I think they take you. I think they take you to the woodshed if you're not. I mean, listen, I am a Steelers fan, but I am more of a fantasy football fan. So if I'm playing against Juju or James Conner, I'm not rooting for them to score. I hope they win. I root for them. But again, fantasy football is king right now. So I will root for them. It's just it's with bated breath. I don't like rooting against them, obviously, but they are. They're a dynasty. They're one of the elite teams in the league. The fan base is phenomenal. And like I said, it's you walk through this town, and I'm sure Green Bay's the same way. It is a football town through and through. So, yeah, I am a Steelers fan, but fantasy does come first. Got to keep your priorities straight.
Exactly. Yes, I totally get that. Let's meld the two together. Something that I'm wrestling with in drafts. What about the number 2 receiver for Pittsburgh behind Smith-Schuster this year? I mean, is it Moncrief? Is it Washington? Is it Deontay Johnson? Or the rookie that they just got out of, I think, Toledo? What about those 3 players? How do you handicap them for fantasy? Do you like any of them?
Well, I mean, everything I'm reading about Moncrief is he's impressing everybody. I listened to a Ben talk about him, and he's just raving about him. Now, the Moncrief I know when he was with Indianapolis and Jacksonville last year, I kind of don't look at Jacksonville as something I should look at it because their quarterback situation wasn't anything to be, to look at. But he did play with Andrew Luck during some peak years. He was young at the time, but everything I'm hearing is he's going to be the guy. And like I said, if the nonsense with Antonio Brown didn't go on this year, he would be being drafted in the first round. Juju Smith would be drafted in the probably mid to late second round. So you got 2 viable options there. If Ben's going to throw the ball over 600 times and Juju, even if you say estimates 170 targets, there's a lot of targets up for sale here. And if Moncrief is the guy, which currently I'm hearing he is, Vance McDonald, him, I'm sure Connor, Jalen Samuels, I'm sure they'll all chip in. But if he gets those 120 targets, 110 targets, I think he could be a viable option. Again, you would better know his current ADP, but he would probably be a guy I would look at, if I'm going to draft a couple of receivers early to try and fill in my roster later on.
Yeah, I've never been a big Moncrief guy before, but I'm with you. A lot of the stuff on the internet for people who follow the team has been very positive about Moncrief. And the fact that I'm not a Moncrief guy, man, Dave, he's going at the 14-12. I am a Moncrief guy at that price. I mean, I totally take a chance on him there.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what I'm saying. That's the kind of guy that I think by the time late August, early September rolls in, that you're going to start seeing him creep up the board because that's a fantastic ADP for a guy in an offense that doesn't throw because of their deficit. They throw because they want to throw. A lot of these stats get skewed because their defenses are bad or they're in a bad game script. But this offense, they love to throw the ball, and so if you got to look at it. Then you got to look at their number 2, and if he's it, that's tremendous value.
BuffaloBills.com had a report earlier this week about the offseason work of the running backs and how the snaps were split as far as the first team goes. And apparently it was equal between LaShawn McCoy, Frank Gore, and Devin Singletary. Now, LaShawn McCoy's already said that he expects 2019 to be very similar to his 2018 as far as usage goes. But Frank Gore wasn't around last year. Devin Singletary wasn't around last year. Bills reporter Nate Mendelson says he thinks the competition is going to heat up once we get to training camp. But this could be a committee backfield. I guess with LaShawn McCoy leading the way at 31 years old. He's in the last year of his deal. I think Frank Gore only signed a 1-year deal with Buffalo. So it could be Devin Singletary sooner rather than later as he, as it stands right now, is the quote-unquote future of the backfield in Buffalo. But from strictly 2019 purposes, and let me get, before you answer the question, let me give you the ADPs. LaShawn McCoy going at the 10 in drafts right now. Frank Gore, the 25-10, and Singletary is going at the 14-06. So all 3 of these running backs are going in the double-digit rounds. Are any of them attractive for fantasy purposes at those spots for you, Dave?
I would say not for me, not for my liking, not for the way that I've drafted. I don't see much upside. Whether it's 3 guys or 2 guys splitting carries there, I don't know how effective their offense is going to be. I don't, I think they were middle of the pack in plays run last year. Their quarterback has a tendency to scramble. So, I mean, I don't like those ADPs. There's just too many other value plays that I would take in those positions. So Buffalo's a team running back wise that I would have a tendency to pass on, just from a standpoint of there's too much clutter, and maybe it'll iron out in the preseason and you'll get a clearer picture of it. But as it stands now, that's just a backfield that I would stay away from. Again, if you told me McCoy was going in the 14th round, you could take a flyer on him. I just think his better days are by him. And he was a great productive, back that could catch the ball and shifty. But I just don't. I wouldn't put myself in that situation. I'd rather take some more upside guys on flyers than those guys.
Let's talk. You talk about flyers. The Tyreek Hill roller coaster continues. You think about what this guy, what we were talking about doing with him, just a month and a half ago, saying that his football, some people would say his football career was over, that he never played another down in the NFL. And now the latest report, the Chiefs could actually re-engage in contract negotiations for an extension in the not too distant future with Tyreek Hill, as long as the investigation with the NFL into him involves in an outcome where he can continue his NFL career. Yahoo Sports, Therese Pryor actually had this story. The Chiefs are hoping that they'll find out what Tyreek Hill's status is going to be prior to training camp. Hill already met with Roger Goodell, and they're hoping that he is, meeting with the team and joining them at the start of training camp. Reportedly, the suspension for Tyreek Hill is going to be a maximum of 4 games. That's all hearsay and speculation right now. But if he's only suspended 4 games, you could look at Tyreek Hill being locked up long-term with Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs, and this has affected his ADP. He was going in the 6th round before. Now he's ascended all the way up. He's entered the 4th round, and I've seen him go in the 2nd and 3rd round of some drafts in the last week of the FFPC Best Ball League. So you look at this, Dave, this situation. Tyreek Hill, are you now on board? Are you now willing to take a chance on this player, knowing that he still could be suspended, or are you still staying away at that 4th round price tag?
Right now, I'd say the 4th round price tag to me is a little high. I was hearing, you hear different things, and I don't know if the NFL would be spilling what they're leaning towards as far as a suspension. But I'm thinking 6 games. So in a redraft league, if you're going to be out 6 games, to me, that's a very, very high price tag to pay. In a best ball format, it is a little different, obviously, because, you get to use your best players. So I would probably consider him a little bit more there. But that for, until I hear specifically how many days and how many games he's going to miss, that's going to impact him, obviously, and it's going to impact everybody. If he's not, he's a 2nd round pick, and it's not even a question. But as it stands now, a little too much risk and not enough reward for my blood. I do like him as a player, and obviously that's an explosive offense. But there is so much that can happen now. We were hearing last year with Le'Veon Bell that he was going to sit out 1 game, 2 games, 3, and then it ended up being the entire season. So I don't like putting myself in risk like that in redraft leagues in a quick season. But we'll see where he pans out here. And if it is 2 games, then I think that the 5th round, 4th, 5th round is probably going to be a more suitable position, but no earlier than that for my liking.
Another speedster in the vein of Tyreek Hill, a poor man's Tyreek Hill, John Brown. He was a frequent target of Josh Allen during the offseason mini camp practices that Buffalo had going on. And actually, Carson Palmer talked about John Brown being a number 1 wide receiver in the NFL. He is very fast. This bodes well for Josh Allen's strong arm. And he's one of the most experienced receivers there. You look at what he could be in Buffalo, and that is the number 1 receiver over, Zay Jones or anybody else that they have there. But John Brown not going until the 20th round, and I guess the moral of the story here is Dave, if I can get a potential number one receiver in the 20th round, I'm taking him in the 18th or 19th everywhere I can get.
Absolutely. Again, that Buffalo team is one of those I would like to stack if in the best ball league, because you don't know who the number one is going to be. Zay Jones had some production late in the year that I think, may warrant a look at. But John Brown that late, I think that's a steal at that draft position. He has explosive. He has had some injuries, some health concerns. But I think that position, you can't pass on him. Allen has shown that he can throw the ball down the field. And John Brown's probably one of the faster guys that can go and get it. So, yeah, I'll sign up for that all day if that's his ADP. If it stays in that position, there's no question about it. Zay Jones is interesting, just from the standpoint of, he was highly touted. I don't know where Cole Beasley and Foster fit in there. I know Foster had a stretch of games there where he actually had a couple long touchdowns. And I'm assuming Beasley's going to fill the role that he does as a slot receiver, trying to, move in and out and catch little passes a la, Julian Edelman. But I would take a flyer on John Brown at that spot. Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, none of these Bills receivers are really being drafted all that high. I look at Zay Jones, he's going in the 16th round. Cole Beasley's going in the 25th round. Robert Foster is not being selected until the 20th round. So you can get all these guys pretty cheap. Right. And if you want to build a stable of Bills receivers and grab 2 or even 3 of them, I certainly think it could pay off dividends in best ball leagues like you had alluded to, Dave. I don't know how much time we're going to have for emails here. I'm going to get to as many as we can, and I'm going to start things off here with Jim in San Antonio. He writes, it's cute and all that Amari Cooper wants to get 2,000 receiving yards this season, but what do you more realistically think he'll get in that offense? Thank you, gentlemen. That is Jim in San Antonio. Amari Cooper, as far as FFPC drafters are concerned, he's not going. He's a mid-third round pick. He's going right behind Antonio Brown, Mike Evans, Keenan Allen, T.Y. Hilton. He's actually going right in front of Adam Thielen, Stephon Diggs, A.J. Green, and Julian Edelman. So Amari Cooper, as we assess what he does this year, I mean, I think he gets 1,000 receiving yards in that offense, Dave. It's pretty run-heavy down there. But right. They gave up a first-round pick to get Cooper on this team, so they want to use him. I'm not a huge Randall Cobb guy. I don't think they have much at tight end. I mean, I know Jason Witten's back, but his best football is clearly way behind him. 2,000 is not going to happen, but 1,100, maybe 1,200. I think that might be pushing it. Maybe 7 or 8 touchdowns, 75, 80 catches. That seems about right to me. What do you think about Cooper this year?
Yeah, I mean, I have him targeted in that 120 range of, getting 120 targets, 75 to 80 catches. I'm probably looking on the high side, 1,100. I think he had 7 touchdowns last year. So, he's productive. That's the type of receiver you're getting. The T.Y. Hiltons and the guys that are going in that range are all in that 120 target range, are getting about those, those type of numbers. So, I mean, he falls in there. I don't think he's going to – I think that's his high end to me. He had some games in Oakland where he completely disappeared. But, Dallas, he was getting, I think his last 4 games his last 3 games, he had 25 targets or over 30 targets in his last 3 games. So he's getting the looks. If his efficiency with his catches stays up, I guess he could surpass 1,200 yards. But I'm with you. I'm in that 1,100 yard range. Maybe 7, 8 touchdowns, which probably puts him as a wide receiver 2. More in the line, late second, early third would be my projection of where he's going to go. But I see some guys falling around him. I would like a little bit better than him.
Yeah, no, I'm with you on that. I mean, I'm just looking at, just the guys I named off, the collection of receivers around him. I'm probably taking Thielen and Diggs over him. A.J. Green's a little bit dicey. But if Keenan Allen's out there, I'm still taking him over Cooper. Brown and Evans for sure. Hilton's a coin flip. I guess I don't know. I guess I'd lean Hilton over Cooper, but that's really close.
Yeah, I like Hilton just from the standpoint is Andrew Luck came back last year. He was coming off an injury. Hilton had a couple injuries with his hamstring. I like Hilton a little bit more. I think he's more explosive. I think he's in an offense that ran the most plays last year. And I don't know if they're going to be as run heavy. in Indianapolis. So I would lean Hilton there over Cooper. But, like I said, if they want to make him the number one guy and Dak Prescott's going to key on him, I think he could have a good year. I don't know if he's can be a top 5 guy in the league. Where I think Hilton, if he does well, Hilton and Allen, I think could easily be in the top 5 at the end of the year.
Yeah, no question. Agree with you. They have a much, much higher ceiling than Amari Cooper. Let's move on to Matt in Syracuse. I was all set for a 2019 breakout from Ronald Jones, but now I see one of the beat writers from Tampa talking up Peyton Barber. Who should I target? Or should I go after both or neither? That is Matt in Syracuse. Thank you for the email, Matt. A lot of questions there. So let's look at ADP first of all and see where these guys are actually going. Peyton Barber, 11.09 on average over the last week in FFPC best ball drafts. Ronald Jones is currently going at the 8.11. So Jones is going first. I don't know if it's the case of just take the cheaper guy. In this case, it'd be Barber. How do you see this situation playing out? And the fact that you don't have to soak a pick until the 8th round into either one of these guys, does it make locking up this backfield attractive for you, Dave? How would you handle the Tampa Bay running backs?
I mean, I think Ronald Jones would have more upside to me. We kind of know what Peyton Barber is. And he's not the explosive back he used to be. So I would lean Ronald Jones there. You throw another guy in there, he's probably not being drafted or his ADP's not there. But here, and Andre Ellington worked with Bruce Arians in Arizona and had some success there. And the early indications are that he's having he had a good mini camp. So he's another guy that you got to look at into the mix and just say, if Ronald Jones, the hype on him last year that he wasn't picking up the offense or he wasn't picking up the blitzes and things like that, I got to believe, unfortunately, it's a new coaching system. Hopefully he'll pick it up better this year. But I just think if I'm going to take a side with an upside guy, I would probably take a flyer on Ronald Jones before I would take Barber, who we kind of know what he is, and I don't see much upside there. I'm just going to keep an eye on Ellington just to see what progresses there because he is a catching down back, and Bruce Arians, as you know, loves to throw the ball. So if that's the case, you might get a surprise there late in the round, especially in some best ball if he does make the team and is productive.
Yeah, that's a good point. Ronald Jones, never really a pass catcher at USC, was definitely not a pass catcher last year as well. So it's all fine and good if we talk about a breakout, but when we look behind it, we got to start seeing some of this stuff on the field. And to date, we haven't. You can get Peyton Barber in the 10th round. That makes sense to me. Ben in Riverside, California. Dear Cooler Dave and Balky, how nervous are you guys for Ezekiel Elliott meeting with the commissioner this week in terms of a possible 2019 suspension about his security guard incident? Great host upgrade this week. Winky face. That is Ben in Riverside, California. Thank you for the email, Ben. The cheeky email from Ben this week. Ezekiel Elliott met with Goodell on Tuesday this week. I don't know the results of that because we're recording this early. But how nervous are you? Because you included him in the big 4 running backs as a guy that you didn't downgrade. So I'm guessing that you're thinking that we either A, won't see a suspension, Dave, or B, if we do see one, it'll be a pretty small one.
Yeah, I don't think there's going to be a suspension. I was listening to the NFL Network the other day, and a couple of the people were saying that a little bit of a white noise. Now, you never know what Goodell is going to do in the NFL office, but I would hesitate to think that he's not going to get suspended. I have him projected not to get suspended. Again, obviously, if he does, it changes the strategy of where you're going to draft him based on the number of games, but I don't think that's going to be the case. And, what you got to look at is he had a lot of touches last year, and I think he only ended up with 9 touchdowns. I got to believe if he touches the ball close to 350 times, that touchdown production is going to go up. So he's high on the board, but a suspension of 1 or 2 games could impact that. It would definitely impact me, not in the pros versus Joes because I picked second, so he would be removed from the equation automatically. But if I was drafting and I did hear that would definitely impact them because, a couple games here and there, especially in a redraft, may be the difference between winning and losing.
I should ask you that, Dave. Do you have, knowing that you do pick second in your draft right now, do you have a player in mind or 2 players in mind that you're targeting with that spot? One of those 2 players will obviously be there, given that you're picking second. Do you know which way you're going to go?
I don't know yet. I have a partner that's involved with this. He's been my partner for the last several years. But I mean, obviously Barkley is fantastic. The Giants' offense with Eli scares me a little bit. McCaffrey, you hear the rumors. It's never been a back that's been the number one back 2 years in a row for however long. And then to me, the third guy right now is Kamara. Again, splitting hairs, but I'm looking at it. Is Drew Brees going to throw the ball as much as he did? It seems like they're weaning away from that. And if Kamara is not the workhorse back, if they're going to use Latavius Murray, I get a little concerned there. So right now, I would probably hedge Barkley or McCaffrey. But again, either way, I probably can't go wrong. It's just, it just gives you something to think about over the next couple of weeks.
Now, your co-manager that you have for this, that's Frank Renner, right?
Yeah, that's correct. He was in the Pros versus Joes several years ago.
Yeah, that was my next question. I think he was in 2014. Did he give you any advice on the best way to attack this competition?
Well, he said don't follow his format, I think was his word. I don't think he was very successful in it. But you know what? It's one of those things where an injury here, an injury there, you don't draft enough at a certain position. So I'm going to go back and look at his draft and try and get an idea of where his roster construction was. But he was in it, and to his own saying, he wasn't very pleased with how it went. But you live and learn. Hey, the first year I was in the Wyckoff, I sat next to Kimra and the Day Drinkers, and I got absolutely exposed, thinking I knew everything about fantasy. And little did I know I was drafting next to a future Hall of Famer and people that know their business. So it's a humbling experience, but hopefully, it's going to be fun, and I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah, and to your, in your defense, you're talking about with Jason Goldman and Josh Held and then Kimmer Schlischer. So some of the best in the business. So that's a tough spot to be in. It doesn't always work out that way, but sometimes it does. And you've obviously learned from it, given your success, even just looking at last year alone. You've certainly come a long way, and that's why you're on the show this week, or a big reason for it. We got time for one more email. I'm gonna butcher this town, but it's Tom in Ashtimo, Michigan. Dear Steve and Doug, I've already heard Balky and Dave talk about their dynasty valuation of DK Metcalf, but how do you guys view him from a redraft perspective? Go Hawks. That's Tom in Ashtimo, Michigan. DK Metcalf, as far as his ADP right now, is at, as I lose my spot here, the 12-11. So he is going at the end of the 12th round, ostensibly going to be the number 2, potentially the number 1 wide receiver in Seattle, although I think Tyler Lockett has a pretty safe handle on that situation. But DK Metcalf, I think this goes back to your philosophy of best ball versus classic, because if you get this guy on your best ball team, he could be a big playmaker, but he could also be pretty inconsistent. How do you view Metcalf?
Yeah, he's a physical specimen, obviously. I'm not sold on his route running ability. Late in Dez Bryant's career, he kind of got exposed for, the way he used to run his routes, and people used to jump his routes pretty consistently as he lost some of his speed. So if you're not a good route runner in the NFL, you can get exposed pretty early. I don't know. Maybe he'll grow into that role as being a better runner. But I don't think he's any threat to Lockett to be a number 1 guy right now. Again, I will key on him in the preseason just to see, how they use him. If it's more of a jump ball situation or on slants, just to get an idea of their offense and, and how they're going to try and incorporate him into the mix. Obviously, when you have Russell Wilson as your quarterback, you can make a lot of errors and he'll make up for them. So, again, redraft leagues, probably a little rich for my blood, but would take a flyer on him. But again, it wouldn't be that early, and even in the best ball situation, as I have too many other guys that I would put ahead of him.
Dave, this has been a lot of fun. I really enjoyed talking to you, picking your brain. We'll be following the action on July 29th when you're drafting from the second spot in the I Must Break You Pros vs. Joe's League Number 5 draft. We'll be covering that live on the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour, pick by pick. Hopefully, if you get a chance to give us a call and make a pick on the air, we always appreciate that. So thanks a lot for hanging out with me this week, man. Best of luck to you in not only Pros vs. Joe's, but the FFPC main. Maybe you and Frank will be taking down that $500,000 this year.
Hey, I hope so. It'd be fantastic. And I appreciate you having us on. And I'd be very remiss if I didn't mention a shout out to all the military people in the Independence weekend. They keep us safe. They go under the radar, but they're so appreciated, and we should look at it more other than the major holidays that we show appreciation to them. But shout out to all the men and women that keep us safe on this Independence Day. It's very much appreciated.
I echo those sentiments as well. They do not get enough just due, so hopefully we can give them just due by thanking them this week. Thanks to Dave Chiodo, the FFPC, Rob Bryce, and, of course, each and every one of you. We will be back live Friday at 10/9 Central on July 12th. Dave will actually be back. He's had basically a month off, so he'll be back next week. Check out those Maiden Dynasties, all the best ball leagues at myffpc.com. And remember to make sure you're paying off those main event teams to get your draft slots early on July 29th. Pay those off by July 22nd. To make sure that you are taking care of that. And of course, as always, your weekend officially starts now.
This has been another episode of the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour presented by myffpc.com that was broadcast live and heard around the world. Eric and Dave will be back next week with more analysis, interviews, and advice from a guest much smarter than they are. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk with you again next week.
We're on the cement floor, even more so if we on tour. Me and E explore the country, wondering about the evening before. Trying to explain where the time went, while other rappers find a studio to grind in.